For one family, their new house was supposed to be a safe haven, right? A place to get away from a medical crisis with their son. But instead, it became the setting for something truly unimaginable, forcing them to ask a terrifying question about the very walls they lived within. That's the question Karen Parker asked herself when she finally learned the truth about her family's new home. And really, it's a question that just hangs over this entire story. Imagine being trapped, with no other choice, forced to live in a place that you're starting to deeply, deeply fear.
So, you have to wonder, how did the Parkers even end up in a place like this? Well, it all started out of pure desperation. They weren't ghost hunting. They were just looking for a lifeline. Okay, so picture this. The family was stretched to its absolute limit. Their 14-year-old son Paul gets this devastating cancer diagnosis. And for his treatment, they're doing a brutal 300-mile round trip every day. It was just impossible to keep up. So finding a big, affordable house just minutes from the hospital, that felt like a complete miracle. But of course, that miracle had a dark side. It was only after they moved in that Karen found old embalming tools down in the basement, and the horrifying truth came out. They were living in an old funeral home.
With no money left and absolutely nowhere else to go, they just had to try and make it work. They even tried to hide the home's past from their kids. But it's like the house didn't want to keep its secrets quiet. Almost right away, strange things started to happen, and they seemed to zero in on the most vulnerable people in the house, the children. And things escalated so fast. It started with something kind of mundane but nightmarish. Karen's mop water just suddenly turns this thick, blood-red color. Then Paul, who's already weak from his cancer treatments, hears a voice with no body just call out his name from the basement. Then his sister sees an apparition of a woman in her bedroom. The boys see this dark figure moving around in the old morgue. And then, maybe the most chilling part, a voice starts calling for Paul from inside an old basement freezer.
The kids were, understandably, terrified. But the parents, Ed and Karen, they were desperately clinging to logic, you know? Could Paul's intense medication be causing these visions? Was it all just an overactive imagination, fueled by the stress of his illness? Or maybe it was just the boys playing pranks on each other. And you can kind of see why they'd think that, right? For a little while, they managed to hold on to these rational explanations.
But then came the turning point. This was the moment everything changed. Karen goes to Paul's oncologist and asks him straight up, could all this medicine be causing hallucinations? And the doctor's answer was a clear, firm no. And in that one moment, all of their rationalizations just shattered. If the medicine wasn't the cause, they had to face the possibility that what their kids were going through was very, very real.
And the effect this was all having on Paul was just undeniable. He went from being a sick but still sweet kid to someone who was withdrawn, angry, just different. He even told his visiting niece that a demon was telling him to hurt his own family. And here's the really bizarre twist. As his physical health actually got better, his cancer went into remission, his mental state got worse and worse. It all came to a head in this violent episode where he had to be hospitalized. And his parting words to his parents were just bone-chilling.
That warning from Paul, they'll be after you now. Well, it turned out to be tragically true. With Paul out of the house, you'd think they might have hoped for some peace. But instead, it was like whatever had been tormenting their son just turned its full, terrifying attention onto the rest of them.
The family's niece, Teresa, she described the attacks that came next. I mean, according to her, the terror wasn't just shadows and whispers anymore. It had become a physical, violent force that could actually hold them down.
So one night, Karen and Teresa are both physically attacked by something they can't see. And at that exact same time, miles and miles away at his job, Ed is assaulted by what he could only describe as a black darkness. I mean, that's the kind of detail that's really hard to explain away. Is it some kind of coordinated supernatural attack? They went to their priest, and his advice was to just forget about it. Can you imagine? How do you forget about a physical assault? Completely desperate, they made a call to the paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren.
So the Warrens show up, and this is where the story takes a whole new turn. They didn't walk in and see a creepy old house or an overactive imagination, no. They saw something they believed was ancient, inhuman, and operating with a terrifying intelligence.
Their diagnosis was absolutely chilling. They called it a demonic infestation. See, according to them, this wasn't your typical haunting by, human ghosts. They believed an inhuman entity was targeting the family in this very methodical, multi-stage process, and it had a terrifying endgame: possession. The Warrens explained that this wasn't just random chaos, there was a playbook. Stage 1, encroachment,
is where the entity basically scopes out a target. Stage 2, infestation, is where it starts to isolate that target, which is exactly what they believed happened to Paul. From there, it moves to oppression, which leads to violence and mental disturbance. And the final, awful stage is complete possession. To the Warrens, it was clear. The entity went after Paul because his illness made him vulnerable.
Now, the solution the Warrens proposed was a formal exorcism by the Catholic Church. But here's the thing about that. It's not easy. The Church has an incredibly high standard of proof. You can't just call up and say your house is haunted. You have to prove it. So their research team actually moved into the Parker house to document every whisper, every shadow, every single attack.
What happened next was basically a terrifying siege. While the researchers were there trying to gather evidence, the Parker family was living under constant threat. That investigation must have felt like an eternity, but it was their only hope.
And the evidence came in fast and dramatically. From day one, the team was documenting voices and physical events. But on the 5th day, the lead investigator, a guy named John Zoffis, had an encounter that was so terrifying he described seeing a full-formed demon that he actually fled the house and refused to ever go back. Think about that. The expert runs away in terror. Well, his testimony, plus everything else they'd gathered, was enough. The church finally sanctioned the exorcism.
So a priest, Father Richard, was sent to perform the rite. He walked into that house fully aware that he wasn't just there to bless a home. He was stepping onto a spiritual battlefield against an entity that had already pushed a family to the absolute brink.
And the exorcism was a violent fight. As Father Richard was praying, his own shirt was pulled tight against his back by some unseen force. In the middle of the room, Karen was reportedly choked and lifted completely off the floor. But this time was different. This time, they weren't alone. Surrounded by the researchers, the family fought back, not with fear, but together, with prayer.
And then, just like that, it was over. Karen described the feeling as this profound, immediate shift. That cold, heavy feeling that had been smothering the house for months was just lifted. It felt warm, the sun seemed brighter, and for the first time in forever, they felt free. They just knew it was gone.
But even though they believed the presence was gone, they couldn't stay. I mean, how could you? The house was just filled with too many traumatic memories. They moved out right away. And shortly after that, Paul was released from the hospital. His cancer was in full remission, and it never came back. The family was finally able to start over, but they would never, ever forget what they went through. So in the end, what really happened in that house on the hill? Was it a case of shared trauma, a psychological breakdown born from the unbelievable stress of a child's illness? Was it a powerful story about a family's faith winning out over their fear? Or did they actually go head-to-head with a real demonic force and win? I guess the answer really depends on what you're prepared to believe.